Hi folks, and welcome back to Dungeons and Drybrushing. Today we're going to be doing a DM tips video. Now since my last DM advice video, I've been writing down everything that I can come up with for just tips to how to run your game smoothly and for story-focused DMs to get the most out of their game and the most out of their time planning it and organizing it so that you have to do less work at the table. Now I've pruned that list down to the 5 best tips and I'd like to share them with you today. Let's get started. So tip number 1 is one that saved me a lot of time and trouble over the years. Don't plan schemes. Obviously, you have to plan a little bit for your schemes. What I mean is, don't go overboard planning for everything that your players are going to do. Don't plan for A, B, C, D, and E because your players aren't going to do those. They're going to do things that you never thought of, things that you never considered. That's part of the fun of tabletop games. So don't go crazy. I mean, sure, you can put in an escape route in your dungeon or things like that, but for actually deciding what your antagonists and villains are going to do in the moment, you don't want to go overboard with that. There's 3 things you need to plan, and just 3 things. Motivation is the first one. What drives your antagonist? What do they really want? What's their goal? Are they just doing this for gold? I mean, that's pretty weak as far as motivations go, and it's going to affect how they behave in game. At what point are they willing to give up that gold? Do they have a personal grudge against the PCs? Again, if they do, that's going to change how they react, at what point they start to run away from a fight, and how much of their resources they commit to each fight. Keep in mind, too, there can be a huge difference between what someone says their goals and motivations are and what they actually want deep down. Usually someone's public-facing goals are things that are more noble, things that can easily be explained, where for an antagonist, a lot of the time their actual goals are pretty selfish. The second thing is resources. Once you know what your antagonist wants, you need to know what they have at their disposal to try to get it. Are they vastly wealthy? Do they have past connections to a mercenary group so they can have sellswords on demand? Do they have maybe a history as a druid or a ranger or something that can help tame wildlife or monsters? What is their past and what resources do they have at their disposal? Do they have political influence through either the monarchy or the church or whatever it is in your setting that has influence? Maybe it makes them untouchable in public so the PCs can't be seen to make a move against them. There are all different kinds of resources that can be expelled by an antagonist to trip up your PCs. You have to know what they have and how much of it they're willing to commit. And that leads us to the third thing, limitations. Now this is going to vary hugely from one villain to another, but you have to know what your characters won't do. Maybe one of your antagonists is a political schemer, and he wants great things for his nation, but he's not willing to do something unpatriotic or that he sees as going against his country's best interests in order to get it. Or maybe that evil sellsword or blackguard that has been a reoccurring villain throughout your campaign, a constant thorn in the PC's side, has limits like he won't harm children. He won't burn down innocent people's houses, maybe because of his own background or something traumatic that happened to him in his childhood. There are just things he won't do. Or maybe your true big villain has a soft spot for animals, and if avoidable, won't do something that harms them. Everyone has their limits in real life, and there's no reason this shouldn't be reflected in your villains. And if your PCs figure it out, maybe they can even take advantage of it. Or maybe not. Maybe it just adds flavor. Maybe it's a way to get your PCs to respect and have a grudging admiration for one of your antagonists because they drew the line somewhere that the PCs themselves would have drawn it. But if you plan those 3 things, motivations, resources, and limitations, it makes it way easier to improv at the table. Because if a situation comes up that you haven't planned for, you know exactly what your villain has at their disposal to do about it, what they want to do about it, and what they won't do. Having these written down in a way that you can refer back to in moments of improv or moments of doubt is a huge help at the table. Alright, this brings us to tip number 2, This is a tough one, tough pill to swallow for some people, but you have to do it. Alright, let's say you've done all of that, you've planned all of this for your villain, you've got this great dungeon mapped out, you've put a lot of work into the monsters and the spells and the locations, and your PCs find a way to overcome it in like 5 minutes using a spell you didn't think of. And they circumvent all the villain's planning and take him out easily rather than having an incredible and epic and difficult fight. Well, that sucks. It sucks, but it does happen. And once it has happened, there is nothing you can do about it to turn that into the moment you want it to be. So as frustrated as you might be in that moment, or as much as you might be feeling like you wasted a lot of time, let the PCs have the moment. They did something cool. Let them enjoy it. In fact, play it up if you can. If it's a huge villain that's getting defeated easily or in a really silly or comical way, especially the more dramatic this villain is, have this be a turning point for them. Have bards in the streets singing about the stupid way that they were defeated. Embrace the fact that you missed something and turn that into a comedy beat instead of a drama beat. It's fine. In fact, the next time that the villain shows up is going to be a great time for you to turn this one way or the other. You can either lampoon the villain and have him become more of a side character for funny plots that happen in the background as he gets increasingly frustrated dealing with the PCs and makes bigger, stupider mistakes. Or it could be the time to change things up from the first tip. Maybe the public humiliation and embarrassment is too much for him, and he starts crossing those lines you said he would never cross. You know, you've seen the fact that he won't burn down innocent people's houses. So the next time he shows up, humiliated and embarrassed and unable to swallow his own pride, he is doing exactly what he said he wouldn't do. He's raising a village, you get an epic boss fight, you throw on some music with Latin lyrics, and you just let the players have at it in the huge battle that is now driven by their actions instead of just by the villain's motivation. That's actually an incredible moment for the PCs. So while it may be frustrating when these things happen, and I know I've been there, you just have to roll with it. Because once it has happened, there's nothing you can do to take that moment back. It's not going to happen. Not the way you planned it, at least. But what you can do is salvage it and turn it into something cool for your game that is going to give your players something to talk about for years to come. Alright, tip number 3. That's the right number of fingers. Tip number 3 is a favorite of mine, and it is incredibly simple, but it can't be overstated how valuable it is when it comes to pacing your story. Here it is, one simple phrase. Meanwhile. That's it. That's the whole tip. If you're establishing a villain or a mysterious antagonist for your campaign, and you're wondering how to show the players that they have their hand in everything, literally just show them. I mean, yeah, you can drop hints and clues in the RP, you can have notes and letters that they find between the villain and some of his servants that they didn't know were his servants, but if your players are having a hard time getting it, or if you're just having a hard time connecting it as a DM, there's absolutely nothing wrong with using a story device. Right at the end of your campaign, when your players think everything is wrapped up, they've won a huge victory, you just drop in, because that's great, guys, here's the XP you get, just one thing before you go for the night. Meanwhile, and you drop into a monologue about what the villain's doing and how the players have played right into his hands. Now you don't even need to show the villain. And in fact, if you wanted a mystery about who they are, what they want, you can just use very generic terms to describe them or have their lackeys talking to them without showing who the main antagonist themselves is. And in fact, that can work even if you're not 100% sure who the antagonist is yet yourself as DM. And then you can just thread it in later, and it will seem like you've known all along. Don't let your players know you did that. Don't tell them I told you to do it. You will, of course, want to be careful what information you reveal to your players this way. You don't want to give them anything that can be used in a metagame sense, even if your players are really good about not metagaming. Maybe you don't want to reveal exactly what your villain is up to or where they're hiding out, but you can use this to actively give your players clues about where to look for things. Maybe you have meanwhile a little cutscene that takes place at a very particular dramatic location, a giant stone arch overlooking a cliff. It has runes carved in it. There's a statue of the Minotaur or Beholder or whatever on the cliff, whatever is appropriate to your campaign. Make it something distinct. And then later, when your players show up at this location, they'll have an aha moment where they say, wait a second, the villain has been here. Of course, they'll be excited about it, and that's great. But did they actually gain anything in a metagame sense? Not really. What happened was that you led them to look for clues where you wanted them to look for clues, to drive the story forward, and to give them the impression that it was actually their doing all along. Tip number 4 might be the least exciting but most important tip that I can give DMs. And it's not just for story management. This relates to managing your entire table, to any problem you might have at the table. It's incredibly simple, and it boils down to just this. Talk to your players out of character. That's it. That's the tip. Whatever issue it is you're having at your table, and issues do come up, whether they're, you're a new DM and you accidentally gave them an item that's far too powerful, and now balancing combat is impossible. Talk to your players out of character. Hey folks, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm new at this. The item that you got 2 sessions ago is actually really overpowered. I'm very sorry if these mistakes happen. It's the same thing if you made a mistake in some other area, or if there's a conflict at the table, or in the way people are behaving, or if you just need more time to plan for a particular session, or anything. Just talk to them out of character. I know it seems simple, but you'd be shocked how often it comes up that people ask for advice, whether that's in person or online or through Reddit or something like that, where the answer is, well, just sit your group down and tell them. Because while it's great to suspend disbelief and to have these moments of gameplay with each other, what's more important is that everybody remains friends and has a good time at the table, and that includes the DM. If there's something that's happening that's preventing you from having a good time or making your life difficult, just tell people. Alright, that brings us to tip number 5, the last one. Now this too might be a bit of a bitter pill for some people to swallow, but trust me, if you change your mindset on how and why you do this thing, it will make your life a lot easier. And this one is for the DMs who tend to write every single thing they possibly can about their homebrew setting. Codify everything. Give it all its own special place in your lore. Now I'm not going to say cut it out, which you might be expecting. Instead I'm going to say you need to accept that you're over-creating your setting for your own pleasure. Now that's not a problem, but do accept that it's for your own gratification. Don't expect your players to care about all of this, or maybe any of it. You're doing this for you, and that's fine, but don't foist it onto your players if they're not having fun with it. You can create all the crazy details and history and culture and lore that you want to if you have fun doing that. But if your fun is going to come from forcing the players to engage in it when they don't want to, then it has become an issue. Now you can create all of these massive details, and you know what? It's fine if your players don't know them. Maybe better than fine, since realistically, their characters aren't going to know all of these details, right? I mean, I certainly don't know every single detail about the history of the country I live in, let alone the world I live in. And even on subjects that I am extremely proficient, I don't necessarily know everything about the adjacent subjects. So no one character should be walking around realistically knowing everything about your world's history, about its lore, about the creatures that inhabit it, about its religion and politics, and so on and so forth. Now it really is fine to do this stuff if you enjoy it, but you have to regard it as something that is extra, that's just for you, and it's a bonus if your players find something in there that they want to engage with. Of course, tables work best when everyone is sort of on the same page with this stuff. You all like telling the same type of story in the same way. But the ideal table isn't always possible. Sometimes you have to accommodate other people, and that's fine. It's actually good. It's going to let you stretch your abilities as a DM and learn to do more things. But if what you really get a kick out of is writing lore and deep backgrounds for everything, you just have to accept that your average adventurer with an intelligence of 8 is not going to know the history of the building that he's standing in. He's just not. Further, he's probably not going to care. In fact, even in real life, people who are incredibly intelligent often are specialized. There's one thing that they know a lot about, and everything else they're kind of average to mediocre in. Now, that's not always the case, but a lot of the time it is. A lot of the brightest stars out there in their given field are really only good at the one thing. So don't expect your adventurers to be experts in your setting. Don't expect your players to be as interested in reading 18 pages of lore as you were writing it. If you're going to do that, just do it for yourself, and if it happens to come up, cool, but don't force it. Okay folks, that's it from me. 5 simple DM tips to help you organize your game and maybe change the way you think about telling your story in tabletop games. Please hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you could let me know if this is the type of content you'd like to see more of, that would be great. In fact, if you have a favorite DM tip that you'd like to share, something you've come up with yourself, or a piece of advice someone gave to you or that you got out of a book even, write it in the comments, that would be great. I'd love to see them, and I'm sure everyone else would too. Thank you for watching. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate it. If you would like to support the channel monetarily, there are links below where you can do that. And to those who have already chosen to do so, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it and how much it keeps the channel going. It's really just phenomenal. So thank you again. Hopefully I'll see you on the next one.